My game is the Stanley Parable, which I believe is the game that shows the advantage of having a unique narrative and a strong comedic edge. The Stanley Parable is a PC game from the year 2013 that was developed by Galactic Cafe and published by them as well. Its creators are Davey Warden and William Pugh. The game's starting premise is that of an office worker named Stanley who often spends all day typing on his keyboard the exact letters and numbers that he's asked to. One day, however, he finds that the numbers are no longer being sent to him. Standing up, he finds that none of his fellow employees are in the office as well. Following this, a narrator begins to guide him towards a likely location of his missing colleagues by sending him down a hallway towards the building's meeting room. After this point, the true premise of the game begins to reveal itself as Stanley is able to make choices that deviate from the narrator's directions, leading him down many different narrative paths that lead to a variety of different endings, which after achieving sends him right back to where he started, at his desk, once again looking for his missing colleagues. It's a game which puts emphasis on your choices, and tries to get you to deviate from the intended path the narrator would often prefer you to go on, or in some instances, try and get you to follow his instructions to find out what'll happen. The game would be a much more boring experience if it wasn't for one of the highlights that I've mentioned already, the narrator. The narrator throughout the game is quite often antagonistic of the player and helps to drive the player down these different routes that I've mentioned, and contributes to one of the massive motivating factors for beating the game with his sense of wit and comedy. Because of the narrator's antagonistic nature and dialogue, plus human nature while playing games to explore and go off the beaten path, it gives the player ideological codes to try and nudge them to make their own choices, which will lead the player to many comedic scenarios. I think one of the reasons the game's narrative presentation is so successful is because of how it plays with the role of the narrator within a typical story. Most narrators are used to describe the events of the story to the reader. In the Stanley Parable, the narrator appears to want to do this, but is instead used to act as a direct link between some supposed creator of the game and the player itself, getting frustrated and talking back to the player when they decide to leave the path of the story that the narrator wants to tell. The narrator playing this role of a creator desperately trying to keep the game's narrative intact is very charming and a unique way to keep the presentation going, as well as keep players captivated, wondering what he's going to say next. It also assists as he often changes the world and scenarios you find yourself in around what you're currently doing and around this supposed premise. All of this will keep players very fascinated to the game and glued to their screens. The comedic edge that the narrator brings to the game makes the story and gameplay what it is, as does the narrator's activity of changing the game around the situations you find yourself in. Everything from a narrative perspective seems to depend on finding ways to deviate from the main story to spur a reaction. It is in some of the game's best moments, both comedically and gameplay-wise, such as the ending where you end up in other games after you frustrate the narrator and make him think you'd rather be playing something else, or the best possible ending in the game, the awe-inspiring broom closet ending. I believe the comedic aspect is really important as it helps to draw players in and keeps the title feeling fresh and engaging throughout the entire experience. I think this is very important for narrative-driven games because at certain points, narratives begin to start to dull around the midway point of most video games, but I think Stanley Parable avoids this by its constant restarting and the comedy, as it can keep players focused on narrative. To conclude, I believe the Stanley Parable is a game that highlights the importance of standing out and finding your own unique voice in the games industry, and making sure you're having a fun time while doing it. Thanks for watching.